Jon Mutchler here, and I bet you are tired of talking about the 2020 election. Hashtag we are all sick of it. But with an impending impeachment trial, and that's a bad idea, by the way. With an impending trial, the election will certainly be in the news again. But this you might find helpful, starting with an incredible number which I memorized. 74,216,154. 74,216,154. That is the number of Americans that voted for the incumbent, President Trump, on November 3rd. That is a staggering number. Never before had any Republican candidate received so many votes. Not either Bush or Reagan, Romney or McCain. That's a lot of votes. More so, get this was 11 million votes more than Mr. Trump received just 4 years earlier. That's a 17% move or increase over 2016. Never before had an incumbent seen such an increase. Again, 17%, 11 million more votes. Now, this sounds like a mathematical formula for an election win. A landslide, right? But was it? Now, time out. Just a second. I have a bit of experience with elections, albeit only on a local level. I think about a half dozen. One included a very close recount race in which I prevailed by just 5 votes. And I want to tell you a true story to make an important point, so please stick with me. I won a close election here in Ferndale in 2015 to become Ferndale's mayor. 4 years later, I ran a robust campaign and our efforts paid off, and I received 31% more votes in 2019 than I did the previous election just 4 years earlier. And an additional 513 votes, which is quite a bit when you consider it's only about 4,000 vote base. Again, a 31% increase. Now that's pretty good and a formula for success. But guess what? I took the silver medal in that race. And I need to ask the question, why? Here is where Occam's razor is right. The simplest answer is usually the correct one. In my case, following the Biden-Trump election, I wanted to check the data, and so I did. And I discovered that though my increase was 31%, there were 35% more county voters in that election than 4 years earlier. And by the way, I always go 4 years at a time, so it's apples and apples. You can't measure year after year because there are different types of elections. Sometimes there are national issues, state issues, or sometimes just local issues. And my main point is this. This is really important. We are seeing an increasing number of voters over the same election 4-year cycle every year. And this is outpacing our population by a long shot. More eligible voters are voting, and we'll talk about why that is in just a few moments. Now, this is really something that you can look up yourself. Just search Ockham elections for the past elections, and I checked our county records, and this is startling. This election year, 2020, there were 22% more people voting than in 2016, 4 years earlier. You think that's suspicious? Go back a year to 2019. In that year, as I said earlier, the number of voters from the previous election in 2015 went up by 35%. But wait, there's more. The year before, in 2018, the increase from 2014 over to 2018, get this, 45% increase. More people are voting. That's the point. And again, here in Ockham County, it went up 45% in 2018, 35% in 2019, and 21.5% in this recent November election in 2020. What does that all mean to us? Simply, there are more voters. Now, I don't think it takes rocket science to understand why there are more voters. First of all, the advent of mail-in voting. And in our state of Washington, that's the only way you can really vote, is mail in or drop it off at a box. Gone are those days in a wet, cold November when you got on your coat and gloves and boots, walked down to maybe a local public school, saw a few of your friends and neighbors, stood there in this cubicle called a voting booth, studied the issues, and voted. Now you get your ballot some 3 weeks ahead of time with plenty of time to study it, put a stamp on it, and put it in the mail. But that's another change. This recent year, they took off the postage requirement. No stamp needed. You just drop that in your box. There's also the ease of registration. In many places, you can register up to the day of the election. Used to not be that way. Furthermore, both sides, left and right, red and blue, are using high-tech and sophisticated get-out-the-vote tactics that are working. They're getting people out to votes, whether they're left, right, or center. And finally, the most important thing, we have a very engaged citizenry because of the internet and the fact that there are thousands of podcasts, news shows, blogs, and online magazines for our citizens to digest their local politics and national politics. Citizens have instant access to information. You remember the days when you get a ballot? Years ago, you didn't really know the candidates, you didn't know what the issues were, and you easily could just set it aside. But because people are informed, that empowers them to vote, and they do so. However, with all those amazing choices, there is a temptation to what pollster Frank Luntz recently said was going on, was that people get online to be affirmed rather than informed. They're choosing news sources to affirm what they already believe and think rather than get informed. So I want to strongly encourage all of us to listen and try to understand the other side and be able to articulate the viewpoint of the other side from a perspective and from a understanding that they would say, yeah, you get it. You understand where I'm coming. You understand where I'm coming from. And go to those sources directly, not have them filtered through one of your favorite pundits. As Polemius in Hamlet said, to thine own self be true. Let me paraphrase that. You need to know your biases, prejudices, tendencies, and filters. You need to know what you want to believe regardless of the evidence, so that you can look at the truth and look at the facts. And can we be honest here about this recent election? Whether you were for or against him, we had a very controversial president who was deeply loved by many and deeply hated by as many more. And I would argue that the number one issue on the ballot on November 3rd was not the economy, was not the Supreme Court, was not COVID-19 pandemic. It was about the incumbent president. So President Trump received a staggering 74,216,154 votes. A staggering amount, really. A lot of your neighbors, a lot of your friends wanted him to be returned for a second term. But guess what? Joe Biden received 81 million, I don't have this number memorized, 81,268,924 votes. And overall, 16% more voters voted nationally than 4 years ago. By the way, much less than the increases we saw in Ockham County. Remember, 21%, 35%, 45%, where no one is crying fraud. So here is my word for my friends who supported President Trump. A bit more than half of your neighbors, friends, and relatives could not and would not vote for him. And we would do well to ask why and have those robust, and I do hope friendly and gracious conversations with them. And don't take the easy route out and just say, the press had it out for him. Yes, the press had it out for him. They did, but there's more to it if we're willing to listen. And for my other friends who could not and would not vote for Donald Trump, 74 million, a record number, voted for President Trump. That's every other neighbor, every other coworker, every other person sitting in those spaced church pews that we're using these days. And this is important, they're definitely not hate-filled, Nazi-loving, knuckle-dragging bigots and racists. And frankly, shame on those who promote that wrong-headed stereotype of those who supported the Republican candidate. And borrowing some controversial words, by the way, demonstrably taken totally out of context, check it out. Controversial words of President Trump. Regarding both sides, I would say this. There are some very fine, very good people on both sides, left-handed or right-handed. There are good people, whether blue states or red states. And also, this is important, there are some ugly, hateful, bigoted extremists on both sides. Both sides have their irrational and perhaps irredeemable haters that should be dismissed and ignored. But that is a different topic for a different day, perhaps. And by the way, there are other issues regarding the 2020 election that troubles me. Personally, I'm concerned about election voter qualification rules that were altered, perhaps unlawfully. But just like the 2000 election, Gore versus Bush, this contest will assuredly be studied and bisected and autopsied and forensic, if that's a word, to death. And when the dust settles and cooler heads prevail, I am pretty confident the results will stand. But for me, I have to admit, it was the great increase, again, 11 million voters more than 4 years ago that voted for Trump that made me take a pause and look at the evidence. That is a staggering number. But even more came out to say with their vote, it's time for a change. And Senator and Vice President Biden is now President Biden. Occam's razor, simple as that. So thanks for listening. I try to call both balls and strikes, even if it doesn't make my side happy, but it makes my conscience happy. And I think truth and honesty, at least for me, are non-negotiables. I know others have a different opinion. Thank you for respecting mine. I would also respect yours. This election is not the apocalypse. We still live in an amazing nation, and we're still trying to become that perfect union. I mentioned in an earlier video that I have lived through now 17 presidential elections with 13 different presidents, about half and half. Some good and maybe some not so good. But we still lead the world in so many ways, in so many realms. And I am still confident in a great future for me, my family, and for you and yours, if we embrace it in the words of President Lincoln, when he said, with malice toward none and charity toward all. Don't just say those words. With malice, evil intent toward none, and charity, grace and forgiveness, and giving people the benefit of the doubt toward all. With malice toward none, with charity toward all. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, and may God bless America.